All right. Another fantastic, beautiful day here in paradise. And with Jim and David the Indian. And Jim, welcome to the podcast. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, my friend. How are you?
Absolutely amazing. And it looks so wonderful that you're sitting out in nature. I'm not sure what part of the country are you in?
We're about 40 minutes from the Orlando International Airport in St. Cloud, Florida.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful.
Yeah.
And David is down on a remote island. It's not remote, but he's living in paradise down in Brazil. And there he is.
Nice.
He just got bounced. He'll be back. But he's also out in nature. So Jim, tell us a little bit about what you do. I love the setting. I love the fact that you're out there outdoors. Orlando is one of our favorite spots. We get down there
Yeah.
quite a bit. And David's talked a lot about your work, but for anybody that doesn't know, why don't you go ahead and give us a little background there?
Awesome. So we are demonstrating freedom on every conceivable level. And I'll get into what that means. It starts with self-reliance, right? We cannot be free if we are not self-reliant. And so the first thing that we did on this land here is start building soil and putting food and food producing plants in the ground. So I'm currently surrounded by about 260 different types of food producing plants. So I've got several types of mulberry and a bunch of types of cherry and guava and bananas and all sorts of stuff.
Wow.
And yeah, and we're 100% off the grid. We produce all of our food, water, and energy needs here right on site. So that's one level is stewardship, is self-reliance, it's tending to the land. And when we tend to the land properly, it provides infinite free energy for us. The second and really important component to what we're doing is we are not complying with the government at all. We have now built 10 homes, including my family homestead, and we did not ask for permission. And this gets really exciting. I had a government agent come here about 16 months ago, and he was standing in front of my house, and he asked my partner, "Hey, I want to talk to the owner of this house about his building permits." So I got a call on the other side of the land, and I started walking over, and I had that wave of adrenaline go through my body. And I turned on my camera and I walked up to this guy and I said, "Hello, my name is Jim Gale, and I'm recording this conversation so we don't mix up any words here." And he said, "Hi, my name's Alexi." I said, "Well, it's nice to meet you, Alexi, but how did you get permission to come on my land? Implied consent is not granted." And he said, "Well, first of all, I want to share. I expected him to act like what I've seen government officials act like. I expected him to act authoritarian and aggressive, but he didn't do that. He said, 'I'm sorry, the gate was open, so I came in, but I will leave if you want me to.' And that disarmed me. So I said, 'Maybe, but before you leave, I would like to show you something.' So I walked him into the food forest here, and I shared with him that it is our duty to our posterity and to everything we love to protect and serve this land and to create beauty and abundance here. And then to take that surplus and to share it with our neighbors in every logical way." And I talked to him for about 10, 15 minutes, and he got tears in his eyes, and he said, "You're right. I will never bother you again."
Wow.
And isn't that beautiful? And the
That
government has
is.
not been back.
What a beautiful story. And, I think it's amazing that you took the time to just show him what you're doing and really bring him in and treat him as a friend and as like a brother. And, it's really good to know that there's people in positions of government that are out there that are just very common sense and grateful people, and they respect and appreciate the work you're doing because that is really like a very advanced way of living, in my perspective, because we're sort of all entrapped in this day-to-day life that prevents us from really being free like you are. So that is really a beautiful story. And what you're doing is amazing, man. I love it.
Thank you, my friend. I mean, I can't tell you how joyful it is to walk around the garden and the yard. And when you said how advanced this is, so I want to share something with you. Buckminster Fuller said that we cannot change things by fighting the existing reality. Instead, we must create a new model that makes the current model obsolete. And the truth of the matter is, this is the oldest model in the book, right? It's the Garden of Eden model. It's
Yes.
and
It's like
so
utopia.
yeah, it truly is. I mean, it's and the best part is everybody can have this, and everybody who makes it through this war will have this because we cannot have it any other way, right? There, we either live in a regenerative way, which is beyond sustainable. Sustainable is baseline. This is epically more than sustainable. This is regeneration and abundance and free energy. So we are demonstrating basically God's design. We are observing and interacting and stewarding this system, and there's food just everywhere. And guess what? I'm not a farmer, and I don't ever want to be. I love farmers, except for the ones who continuously poison the land, right? I care for them, but they're way off base. And so anyway, this is the easy way of living.
Wow, that is amazing. So in addition to growing the food, do you what how do you do the water? I guess you guys have wells and things like that that you're able to tap into.
Yep, we have wells, and we are doing a large water catchment system on our house. So I'm putting it into probably IBC totes on the side of the house. We also have, and this is kind of neat, because we are not we're free and we're sovereign and we're our own sovereign little nation. Because of that, we can do things that make sense that are illegal. So we've got 5 shipping container homes on the property that are structurally way more durable than these houses, stick-built houses around here. And they're incredibly functional, and they're reusing, recycling, and repurposing trash, right? So now we're taking trash and we're living in it, and everybody loves it. In fact, we have an Airbnb at galtzlanding.farm where we have 150 reviews. And on those reviews, we have 2 4-star reviews and 148 5-star reviews.
Wow. Wow. So did you basically converted the shipping containers into like living like little mini houses?
Yes, they're beautiful little casitas that people love. And they're really comfy, and long skinny homes, and with a big deck on them, right in the nature, right surrounded by chickens and turkeys and food forest. And yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Well, I know shipping containers very well because I'm in the medical industry,
Oh
and
yeah.
we're packing them and loading them every week or two. We're sending 1 or 2 containers. Most of the stuff that we do is going out all over the world, but those things are incredibly structurally, unbelievably strong. And I
Yeah.
mean, I ship a lot of hospital beds, right? So
Yeah.
the average container is going to have a minimum of 50 beds, and every one of those beds is 500 pounds. So that is just a tiny little load of 25,000 pounds, but that's not even touching the amount of weight that those things can carry. So
Yeah.
from a structural standpoint, like you said, there is nothing that's going to mess with
Mhm.
a 40-foot shipping container.
Yep.
Nothing.
That's right. We're even going to partially bury one and put some dirt over the top with and make some gardens on top of it. And then that will be our shelter in case we get like a category 6 hurricane or something.
Wow, that is amazing. That is really, really cool. So Jim, walk me through a day in the life at your location. What is it like to be, to be you, and what is your day-to-day life kind of like over there?
You know, I wake up and I have this organic coffee with lion's mane mushrooms, powdered lion's mane, and shaga and some other mushrooms could be added, but that's my main thing, with butter and honey. And honey normally from the land, although our bees they grew too much and they left the hive. So we've got to get new bees. But anyway, and then after my coffee and catching up on like the headlines, I don't get into the social media as much as I used to. I'd way rather be enjoying the land. So I go out and I just walk around and I have my walking breakfast. I grab like right here, these are mulberries. So right at the, oh, right there. Also,
Oh,
isn't that amazing? Look at these
David,
beautiful.
have one. David, give one to David. Yum.
Right?
Oh, yeah, baby.
Yeah. Oh my God. So I walk around and eat breakfast. Sometimes I'll harvest some eggs and I'll go make some eggs for a little later breakfast. And then because we're still a new food for us, like I'll just show you around a little bit.
Yeah, show me around, man.
2.5 years ago, there was nothing here but sand. Right? This was Florida sugar sand. There was no life. There was no ground cover. There was no fruit trees. There's no butterflies, nothing. And we started by putting mulch on the ground. And interestingly, the first $15,000 worth of mulch we purchased. Now, this is a big area. It's about 7 acres. And then we got in touch with the local tree trimming people that work for the county. And since then, this is now their mulch dumping ground.
Wow.
Right. So we got the next $100 and some $1,000 worth of mulch for free because we have the space. And by the way, for everybody listening, if you want mulch, there is a nonprofit called chipdrop.com. It's CHIP drop.com. And you can sign up to have free mulch delivered at your house whenever there's a truck that needs to dump it somewhere.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Yeah. So you basically took the land that didn't have a lot of life on it, got the mulch in there, and then just turned it into this massive agricultural thriving area with all this biodiversity, all these different trees and different things. And you know what's interesting, Jim, is that everybody talks about what's the best thing to eat and diet, and everybody talks about what they need, and everything's different. But they always go back to chimpanzees and gorillas and some of the strongest, most intense animals on the planet. And they eat very much like what you're eating right there. Yeah. Their diet is almost very much the same. A lot of fruit. There's something about fruit and maintaining muscle mass and being able to stay healthy with fruit. And I mean, when you're picking it right off the tree, brother, that is like live living nutrients. When you're eating live food, that's live, everybody that's out there, if you don't understand, processed food has no life to it. But when you're eating it right off the tree, and those are living cells coming in to help take care of living cells in the body, it's so much more intense. It's so much healthier.
Yeah, it's like eating sunlight. It's so badass. And the taste and the joy of it. Like my daughter and I, she's 5 years old. She'll be like, Dada, let's go get some mulberries, right? And so at certain times, we'll come out sometimes twice a day to eat mulberries, which I just learned from David Avocado Wolf here, who was here a couple of years ago. He said, Jim, the mulberry has some of the most nutrient, like diverse profile of any fruit, right? And I was like, wow, right? And then right next to the mulberry, we got these cherries, acerola cherries, which are supposed to be the highest vitamin C content of any fruit, right? And then here we've got a moringa tree, right? You probably know this one. This is known as the tree of life, the miracle tree. There's more vitamin C by weight in the leaves of this tree than an orange, more potassium than a banana, more calcium than milk, and more protein, eggs in the leaves of this tree.
A moringa tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And the seeds.
Go ahead.
Clean water. They clean water. The seeds, actually, you put them in water and they'll clean the water.
Like a moringa tea. How do you, or do you just eat the leaves right off the tree? What's your preference on eating it? How do you like to serve it up?
My favorite way is to walk around and eat it like a goat would. I just take it right off the tree and eat it. And we are doing an herbal tea business, and moringa, lemongrass, hibiscus, all these plants around will be we will be giving to the market as herbal tea, or bringing to the market.
Man, I can't, dude, do you ever show up at farmers markets with your stuff?
Not yet. So far, we are putting it all back in the ground, but at a certain point in the near future, we will have such radical abundance that we will be at farmers markets all over the place.
How long have you been set up there? Like what we're looking at, how long did it take you to develop that?
Um, so amount of energy into this system took maybe a group of people, a team of people. There's a permaculture class here, and I think it was like 3 or 4 days of about 8 people planting constantly, and digging holes and putting soil around the actual where the trees go in the ground. Um, so this whole thing cost us around $150,000, and it's about an acre with beautiful pathways of really a huge diversity and amount of crops.
You can just walk through there and just take a seat and just enjoy the birds, the butterflies, and all the nature, and just sit literally in
Yeah.
nature and just really
Yeah.
like that. That's amazing, man. I love it. Some of the stuff that we do, Jim, and we're very in tune with indigenous people, and Dan Winter. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a really amazing guy. And they
Yes.
talk about how these are all living creatures. They're all sentinel beings.
Yeah.
They all have personalities, and they're all alive. And the Indians communicated with the trees and the plants. They were in
Yeah.
tune, and they knew that these were living entities. Even in large indigenous tribes, they would consult the biggest tree in the area as an elder, or the biggest lake, or the biggest areas there. They would be considered elders
Wow.
for them, which they would actually talk to. So when you're sitting in all those plants, not only in these massive energy fields, because they're all plasma energy, they all have an aura, but you're also dealing with intelligent, mindful, creatures that, actually can talk and have personalities. And, that when you start tuning into all that, and you can just do that 7/24,
Yeah.
that is absolutely
Yeah.
amazing, man. That is pure utopia. That is the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, it truly is. I feel so blessed every day. And as I'm walking around and just being with this living energy system, these ideas and strategies are coming to me that are so powerful that I get these ideas, and I stop what I'm doing, and then I call somebody or text somebody or write something down. And what that has led to is, for instance, about 20 months ago, I got this vision of a campaign strategy, and I wrote it down. And within about 3 or 4 months, I'm sitting with Bobby Kennedy, just him and I'm laying out. And I said, Bobby, the campaign that I'm going to share with you right now will not only win you the election, it will change the world. The campaign itself will change the world. And he looked at me funny and said, Really? All right, let's see it. So I started with 4 big claims at the top of the page. And the first page was the picture of Bobby Kennedy surrounded by kids at a school. And the kids are surrounded by a food forest. And the big claim at the top of the page said, I will take the poisons out of our schools and our children will heal. Now, if Bobby actually would have done this, and he did it a little bit, and it went viral, but if you'd have made it more of a thing, I believe that in an integrous election, he would have for sure been elected. Now, anyway, and by the way, this is important to note. When kids participate in growing food and dealing with the soil and propagating and planting seeds, they do heal. It's been proven over and over and over again. Isn't that cool? So if this is the only thing that happened, was that every school took out the poisons, and then the students learned permaculture, that would change the world.
That is absolutely amazing. Well, so what do you think now that he's been brought in as the Health and Human Services? He might still be able to retake all that knowledge now. It seems like it seems like he's not messing around. It seems like he's coming in and he knows what needs to get done. And I love the fact that you prelude this with the kids, because obviously it's the kids that are the highest priority, and they're the ones right now that are, really unfortunately being targeted. So, with that knowledge that you've given him, I'm sure that went into a database in his mind, and hopefully now he's in a position maybe even more powerful as HHS to now really just 100% focus on just that. Um,
Yeah.
but that's amazing that you're able to get time with him like that and spend time with him and actually give him that data drop.
Yeah, it really was amazing. And I witnessed him be inspired. Like he got color in his cheeks and he goes, Stephanie, which is his assistant. He goes, hey, let's get to Galt's Landing. Right. And I'll just share a couple more of the headlines because I had 4 campaign points. The other one, the big claim, and this was a picture of Donald Trump in this picture, and he was surrounded by inmates in a prison. And he said, I will reduce crime by 50% over the next 4 years. Now, if he would have said this back 16 months ago, the media would have just roasted him until we lay out the strategy of how to do that. And here's how you do that. When inmates grow their own food at prisons, not only do the taxpayers in one study save $40 million, but the recidivism rate went from 67% to 10%. So that's literally the end of the majority of crime, just by having the inmates do what they want to do, which is steward the land and grow their own food.
It's interesting you bring that up because they also talk about areas where there's a lot of trees have much lower rates of crime. So when they're around the trees, the plants and nature, it automatically like changes their vibration, and they're not as they're much more stable, much more peace and loving. And so that actually, transposes also not just with the environment for the prisoners, but ways that we can incorporate this type of thing within cities, where we can say, look, let's designate this city block and reconstitute it. And, I know in some places they're even trying to do that on the rooftops, where they're saying all these rooftops of all these buildings, let's build parks, let's grow trees, let's bring more of nature into our urban environments. And that's really an amazing statistic. And it's actually, it's fascinating, but it's so true, right? It's like, it's shown to be proven true, all around the world where they've done these studies.
Yeah, and you're intuitive. The third bullet point was DeSantis surrounded in a city park saying, I will end hunger. And it's exactly what you're talking about. In fact, I'm going to share some numbers with y'all. So the Bitcoin, the crypto market is about $2 trillion, I've heard. I haven't studied this, so I might be off a little bit. But if we had $2 trillion invested in the real, in nature, in the living system, that would equate to over 600 $1 million food forest installations in every county in the United States, which would be the end of mass extinction and deforestation and cancer and diabetes and heart disease and hunger and so on.
Yeah, it's amazing. A couple things just to bring up. It would definitely help our environment and help, the ozone and all that. But, one of the things that we talk about is that animals in the wild, well, me and David, I'm into a lot of technology, right? So I'm into this med bed technology, Tesla technology, energy and frequency technology. But brother, you are in the ultimate med bed, which is nature, right? And I told David, when you're grounding and you're in contact with the earth and you're surrounded by nature, that is the ultimate med bed. When you're connected to the ground and your feet are on the ground and you're getting the energy of all the plants, you don't need a med bed, right? The whole med bed thing is coming about because we've been disconnected from nature, and animals like, like say wolves, and we've talked about this, when they're out in the wild, they do not have diabetes. They do not have high blood pressure. They do not have, they don't have any of that. But as soon as they're in houses with the
Yeah.
humans, the pets have just as many problems as the humans do. And that's an environmental condition from being disconnected from the earth.
It is. Oh, you're blowing my mind with your the synchronicity. So this is a Tesla-esque device right here. This is a trail disruptor that has a little 9-volt battery. And then this is our med bed. This is our living med bed. It's got electroculture all around. So it's got the copper in the ground. It has organite. It has moringa and turmeric and ginger. And then it has aromatherapy. We've got lemongrass and Cuban oregano and bay and all of these aromatherapies. And then my favorite therapy is butterfly therapy. So at times, most times a year, there's just loads of butterflies here. So this is our living med bed.
Wow. Now talk to me about that Tesla thing. What was that?
Um, so this was presented to me as a chemtrail disruptor. And I don't know how to talk very intelligently about it, other than it has like qubit technology based on the measurements of the pyramids. It has organite, it has tensor technology, and I don't know what all that means, but I have witnessed, in fact, okay, so right above us, we put a new battery in. Right above us, there are no chemtrails. But if you look on all sides of us, I don't know if you can see that,
I can.
but yes, but there are chemtrails in every direction except for straight up and maybe straight north.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't know. Is that a coincidence? I've observed it so many times on camera where we literally plugged it in and it was a very heavy chemtrail day. And there was like, you couldn't see a blue sky even. It was just gray. And we plugged it in. And one time, 10 minutes later, we looked up and there's a circle right above us. It was crazy.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Multiple
I
times.
love that.
Yeah.
And so the other part, that other little med bed area that you've got that was off to the side of that, what
Yeah.
is there like a bench? Oh yeah, I see the bench over
Yeah.
there. So you basically
Yep.
could just hang out there and you've just put so many different frequencies and so many different things in that area that you're just getting saturated with all different forms of nature and sacred geometry.
Exactly, exactly. And the bench has its own epic story. So Christopher Allison, who's our head of security and our chief operating officer, he was the security team leader at the Pentagon for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Anyway, now he's here helping us create real security, which is food security, right? So people say, Jim, you've got food security. I said, not yet. We will have food security when all of our neighbors' kids have enough to eat. Right, that's food security. So anyway, so this Christopher invited his pastor in from the local big church up the road here, and we were walking around the food forest talking. I was sharing with him the idea of stewardship, right? And he's a 20-year, very experienced and very wise pastor, and he lit up. He got so excited. About 3 weeks ago, he invited us into his church and he talked about stewardship. And Chris and I were outside with his truck bed was full of sweet potato starts. So we are not just giving them a fish, but we are teaching them to fish metaphorically by starting with sweet potato starts here in this zone, which create massive abundance.
Wow.
And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because he made us that bench, and he isn't that beautiful?
It's absolutely amazing. And I could see where, just being out there in your normal routine, where that would be a place where you could just sit down and just meditate and
Yeah,
just become one with the environment, become one with nature, basically.
that's exactly right. Just allow all of the mind and the government and all of the addiction and trauma and suffering just to melt away and just be present. And that's where the magic happens.
Wow. So Jim, do you ever have like when you have visitors, do you ever bring like kids or schools, or do you have any type of stuff where you bring people in to try to educate them on what you're doing?
I've done well over 1,000 tours, and we currently have a 100% inspired rate. And so yes, we've had busloads of kids come up from Miami. We love doing tours, and yeah, everybody will leave. And here's the fun part: everybody will leave the tour with food to grow. So everybody can have sweet potato starts and some other things, and they will be able to go home and put it in the ground and start growing their own food day one.
Dude, what is the level of satisfaction that that gives you when you have people there and you're changing their life? Talk to me about the feeling inside knowing that you are like doing amazing work and God has brought you to that place. Talk to me about that.
It's a feeling of presence. Every once in a while, when I lose my presence, I take a couple deep breaths and I look around and I pinch myself, and then I'm back to presence. It's for me. Well, I've studied the great thinkers of history for quite a while now, like Napoleon Hill. You know, he wrote Think and Grow Rich, and
Know him very well.
his primary deduction is whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve.
Yes.
That's powerful. And I don't want to debate Napoleon Hill. I think he was right. So I'm playing with that. Right. And then Sun Tzu, The Art of War, his primary deduction: know thyself, know thy enemy. 1,000 battles, 1,000 victories.
Yeah. Know thyself better than thy enemy, or know thy enemy better than thyself, right?
Yeah. 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 And then we
And
win. We
and
already won.
yeah, exactly. And I love Sun Tzu and I love everything about Napoleon
Yeah.
Hill. You know, it's interesting. You bring up Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich, and whatever the mind can believe and conceive, the mind can achieve. And you know, what's amazing, Jim, is a lot of his original lectures are on YouTube, like from the
Oh,
30s and 40s. So you can actually watch
wow.
Napoleon Hill live giving presentations and going through the entire Think and Grow Rich book himself. So I've stopped reading it because I'd rather sit down and have him talk to me, right? But one
Oh,
thing about Think and Grow Rich, and you know, Napoleon Hill, for anybody who doesn't know, Andrew Carnegie brought him in as a young person and wanted to impart this knowledge to him. And he went through a very rigorous test. And the massive test was, I don't know if you know the story, Carnegie goes to, are you willing to work for the next 10 to 15 years and make almost no money to do this work and to do this? And Carnegie had a timer and he wanted him to say yes. And it had to be like within 30 seconds or something
yeah,
crazy,
yeah,
because if he didn't just automatically say yes, Carnegie was going to pull him. But Hill said yes, and Hill dedicated, it was 20 years that Hill dedicated to doing interviews, and Carnegie set him up with all the greatest minds. It was Ford and all the richest people in the world, and Carnegie went and interviewed them. And Jim, one thing I find interesting, and I'm going to throw this to you because I want to kind of hear more. But Carnegie found that all these successful people, one thing that they all had in common is they had a support system and they had somebody in their life that supported them and was there for them during their ups and downs and was always like that stability rock that pushed them forward and said, I believe in you. And every person had that person in their life at some point. Most of the time, it was the wife, who was actually a very strong person that might have been behind the scenes. And that was the person that when ups and downs came and they thought this is it, they would inspire them and say, no, you're going to do it. And they would come in those moments and push them forward. And I'm wondering, with all the work that you do, you had a little baby girl. I'm wondering, are you married, or do you have that support system in
yeah.
your life, and talk about that maybe.
Yes, I sure do. My wife and I, it's our 17th year anniversary, 23rd, and it just keeps getting better and better and better all the time. And it's funny because we're very different. You know, she grew up in Costa Rica, and we have different cultures, different everything. But in times when I've been struggling the most, in fact, one time was about eight eight and a half years ago. We were living in Costa Rica, and we'd been living there for 11 years. And the Costa Rican government came after us, tried to extort us. We fought them. We beat their ass in court. And according to a court appointed actuary, they owe us $28 million. And I'm not holding my breath. So anyway, I started another company after my developments failed with the extortion and everything. And the system was so corrupt from top to bottom with extortion from the lawyers and the accountants and all this that I said, babe, we got to leave. I can't do business here. I'm a gringo. I'm not even allowed to work in Costa Rica. So we got to go. And she didn't want to go. And I got down on a knee and I said, baby, I need you. And anyway, from that moment on, there's been this connection and she's been so supportive. It's just been amazing.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? It's those silent figureheads behind the scenes that are the glue that holds everything together, and that is always, I find that amazing. And Jim, the other thing that I always love to hear are the times where you persevered and pushed through, because we
No.
can see right now that this is an amazing thing and it's it's a mountain of work, it's a labor of love. But like with anything, it doesn't happen by itself, right? There are trials and tribulations that you need to kind of go through to
Yeah.
to to make the dream come alive. And we don't have to go into a lot of detail, but maybe like that story is a great story because in fact, had that not happened, perhaps you're not here right now in Orlando and doing what you're doing, had this whole thing in Costa Rica not kind of pushed you out of there. But do you want to talk about maybe some things that have kind of happened that were challenges that you had to overcome to make this happen?
Oh, I love that. In fact, I think every one of those challenges are the exact reason that I'm here, right?
Absolutely.
Challenges are simply gifts that sometimes we're not aware of their value. But every crisis is a dangerous opportunity, an opportunity to say, how did I play a role in this circumstance? Because we do, all is mind. And by the way, I just wanted to show you this. Can you see that white squiggly?
Yes.
That's a rocket that just launched from SpaceX.
Wow.
Yeah, I just find this very interesting. We are completely free. Everything we're doing is illegal, but it's lawful and it's justified. And we're surrounded by entities like Tavistock and Disney and NASA and SpaceX and all of these crazy. And we're just sitting here smiling, creating abundance. But so I truly embrace and I'm so thankful for the adversities, right? In fact, one of my first prayers I learned after the Our Father was, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so when I look back on these adversities, like I'll just give you one. When I was 17, I was rated first in the state in wrestling, and I lost in the state finals to a guy that I had beaten 5 times in a row. Right. And I went through kind of this mini depression. At that time, that was important to me in my life. Next year sucked. And then my first year in college sucked. And then I wrote my goals. I had listened to Dennis Waitley, The Psychology of Winning, on an audio tape on a long car ride, and it blew my mind. And so we got home from this trip, and our college wrestling coach said to everybody, "You have to write your goals." And I didn't want to because it seemed like homework to me, and I didn't like homework at all. So anyway, on Sunday night, I started writing, and I read the first question: what do you want to achieve? What do you think you can achieve? And anyway, I ended up writing on that document that I wanted to be a 3-time All-American and a national wrestling champion. And at the time, I had a horrible history, and everybody in the room was pretty much better than me by their record, at least in high school. And by writing those goals, by stepping into my future self, I became inspired in a way that I had never experienced. And I ended up being a 4-time All American and national champion. So that proved to me Napoleon Hill is onto
Yeah, I
something.
love that. What a great story. And what a great accomplishment because when you're at the college level, man,
Yeah.
you're stepping in. That's the big leagues right there. So nothing is handed to you. And there's nobody out there helping you on the mat. It's between you and one other guy, right? So it's your skill and determination and your hard work that's going to go in against that. So, there's a lot of team sports out there, but when you're on the 101 mat type stuff, it's 100% based on your hard work, and obviously there's more to it than that with knowledge and skill and everything else, but that's really an amazing story. I find it interesting, Jim, because sometimes when we're getting the snot beat out of us and things aren't going right and all this stuff happens, at the time that you're going through it, it's a tornado, right? It's chaotic, it's crazy. Things are shifting fast. You've got to make a lot of changes, a lot of adjustments. You've got to do a lot of different things. And then maybe it's a year, 2 or 5 years later, you look back and go, wow, man, had that not happened in the moment, sometimes it's very difficult to see it. But it's very clear sometimes when you go back and you look at it a year, 2 or 3 years down the road, and you realize that that was a necessary action or a necessary thing that had to happen because it changed the course of what you were doing and you needed to be back on a different path or make a slight adjustment, or like you were talking earlier, maybe you needed to make a move and get to an environment that would be more conducive to living the dream and doing what you're doing. And so what I find that with all great people, Tony Robbins, all these guys, like everybody knows Tony Robbins is a great guy, and I love Tony Robbins, but Tony Robbins to me is a guy that overcame a massive amount of adversity, growing up in an environment where he had 4 different stepfathers. His mom was very abusive. He started out with Jim Rome trying to learn and figure out all this stuff, right? He went through that. But Tony lived a life for a very long time, not I don't know how long, but at least a couple years where he was just making it. He was just barely scraping by, and he was trying to become the person he wanted to be. And there's a story, and I've told it to David before, where he's living in Venice. He's out at a little restaurant. He sees a 7-year-old kid taking his mom out to dinner for like Mother's Day, and he's getting the chair for her,
Yes.
and they're both all dressed up. And Tony's looking at this kid going, man, this kid he's so respectful and he's such an incredible gentleman, and he's got this real glow about him. And Tony comes up and takes all the money out of his pocket, gives it to the kid, and says, hey, this is on me. I'm paying for the lunch. I'm covering this for you today, young man. And he has that moment with this kid because he identifies with the path that this kid is on, and he wants to be there to support him, even though he has nothing. And he's walking back to his apartment, and he's like, I just gave away all my money. I have no idea even when my next check is coming. And out of nowhere, this check appears, and somebody pays him back for something he was not expecting. And the next thing he knows, he's got his rent paid for the next month. And so that happens there. And then there's another scenario where Tony is he gets something happens in his business and he goes negative like $30 million. And I know Tony's story fairly well because I've spent a lot of time in San Diego, and
Yeah.
Tony for a long time lived in Del Mar and had a nice place there. But
Yeah.
once again, he's not just in debt. He's like in $30 million of debt.
I think it was 100 million. It was
100
Amway.
million. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. And now it's like, dude, okay, not so I'm thinking to myself, I don't care how bad my problems are. I'm not 100 million down. And even if I was, there are people that have come before me that have basically gone through this and they've come through the other end. And John Asseroff and other people as well, from The Secret, if you know him.
Yeah.
And so that's what's inspiring to me. And I love what he's doing. And I think he's an amazing guy. But I look at these people and I say, man, when the chips were down and you were getting the snot kicked out of you, that's when the rubber meets the road, if you know what I mean.
Oh gosh, I sure do. And I'd like to speak to Tony right now. And anybody listening, if you know anybody in the Tony camp, or if you know Tony himself, I've been to Business Mastery and UPW and all that, and I'm totally there. I get it. And Tony has this incredible thing where he gets everybody in his groups to feed the hungry, right? Because that helped him out when he was hungry and his family was hungry. Tony, I've got a better way, brother. The better way is to feed the hungry, is to take some of that money and keep feeding the hungry the short-term meals that they need, but take some of that energy and start building these systems, because every system creates exponential food. And Tony, if you want to know how to do that, everything we do is open source. I'm here and at your service to inspire this shift. In fact, we even wrote a document kind of in your words about exactly how to do it. So Tony, get a hold of me.
Yeah, Tony, Tony's such an amazing guy. I love Tony. And I love the fact, like you're in a position now to change the world, right? And create these new models. And Tony's doing that. Tony's helping people at a very innate level. Tony also is very in tune with nature. He's in tune with a lot of technology. Tony's very much at the forefront. A lot of the technology that I work with, Tony has gotten it before I did, or has known about it for a longer period of time. But the whole feeding and giving back, that goes back to Tony's childhood, where he had very little, and there was times when they didn't have food. And as great as Tony is, and it's all the work that he's done, it's the desire to want to help others that'll probably go down as his greatest asset, where he came in and said, I'm going to do so much good in the world, but it's going to be the fact that I'm going to help feed people, and I have a heart and I have compassion. And that's
And
it's
strategy.
such a, I love, Jim, I love what you're
Yes.
talking about there, brother.
Yeah.
That is just,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where the whole thing really takes flight. And that's
Yeah.
where, these people really do like amazing things.
Yeah. It really is. When we follow Dr. Martin Luther King's advice, he said, those who love peace must learn to organize as effectively as those who love war. That's what we must do. And it's not even quite true. It's actually way better than that, because even if we organize 3% as effectively, we have God's design, we have nature on.
Jim, is there like do you have a website?
Yeah. So I don't personally, I've given up all my equity and assets and everything other than my family homestead, because that provides way more than we need. And I follow the permaculture ethics, which are people care, earth care, and reinvesting surplus to people care and earth care. So all of our surplus goes to serve this mission of putting food forests in schools and prisons and city parks. So the websites that I'll share with everybody are foodforestabundance.com, foodforestabundance.com, and NITA, it's NITA dot one. And through them, you can find all of the collaborators, which are the solution providers. And if you want to come visit, it's galtzlanding.farm. It's GALTS landing.farm. And you can come stay with us in some of our Airbnbs. And by the way, we're on a private 430-acre lake where we've got the only 2 docks on the lake.
That's amazing. So I'm going to have this down in the description. So if you're watching the video, don't freak out. You can go to the description. You'll have it. So it's foodforestabundance.com. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. And then what was the second one?
That's right. Yeah. It's NITA, NITA .1. And that stands for Nature is the Answer .1.
NITA.1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the last one you gave me was Galt's Landing, GALTS landing.com. And that's where people can come visit, spend time in the Airbnb. Oh, .farm. Got it.
Yep, .farm. Yeah, and
Farm,
that's
yeah,
right. Yeah, they can spend time here. The food, they can go out and harvest food. They can use the kayak on the private lake. Yeah, it's a neat situation.
It's awesome. So this is what you're really doing, is creating the prototype that can be robbed and duplicated. And you can say, this is how you're going to put the whole thing together. And it's like, I call it R&D. R&D is not research and development. You've done that. Now it's in the rob and duplicate R&D, where you can take the business model and stamp it out.
Exactly right. And
So
it's all about the team. Yes.
Yeah. So you've got like, here's the list of the best plants, here's the list of the best trees, here's, the prototype on how you're going to get the mulch, which we talked about earlier. If you're on a limited budget, you contact these folks, you can get your mulch brought to you. And I love that. And we've got a few minutes here. We still got close to maybe 10 or somewhere in there, but talk to me
Oh,
about the
cool.
future, Jim. Talk to me. I want to hear the vision of the future. I see where you're at right now. I want to hear where you're at in a year, 3 years, 5 years. Give me the future forecast of where this is going and what your work is going to be as we progress.
Okay, so they're all unsustainable systems fail. And our current systems, from education and medical to the military industrial complex, and especially farming, is unsustainable, right? That is changing. It's changing rapidly. And it must change because we will either experience a collapse or a transition. And to the degree that we transition is to the degree that we will live or not live. There's a lot of somebody's talking there.
Yeah, it's somebody's
David.
in the background at David's thing there.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. I don't mean to interrupt you, Jim.
Yeah.
You're on a roll. And this is just a moment that I can just say thank you very much, Jim. I've been popping in and out. Unfortunately, the signal here, I don't know. I don't want to be paranoid, but there was a possibility that I didn't come on because you were on your game. You know what I'm saying? You don't need me to interrupt what you're doing. Just for people listening to this in a short brief, Jim, you are very similar to many of the other people already on the show. I've known you now for several years, and it's taken a long time to get to this point. And so beautiful, huh? We have those two here. We have those here as well.
What is that, Jim?
It's a star fruit.
Star fruit.
Yeah.
Wow, I've never even seen that before.
Yeah. We have 35 different tropical fruits here of varieties that you don't get in the supermarket. So, and that's why Jim is so exciting for me to have today, because really I've spoken to him about doing a Farm Fresh Academy here, and also the forest abundance, food forest abundance, and all of that. So I don't want to take away from the momentum. I know there's only a few more minutes, but really let's continue this, Jim. And also this platform with Sean is a 24-hour, 1-hour segment. So in the future, you can come on and have your own show, and we can work with Matthew and your whole promotional team. I just want to say thank you very much. And in a summary, the work. How's your work doing with the prisons? Did you talk at all about your work with the prisons?
So there's so many neat things to chat about. I haven't got to that big one yet. So we are working on the details to catalyze a shift that leads to mass adoption of inmates growing food at prisons. And we're getting really detailed. We're working with a pastor from Oklahoma and one of the lead sheriffs in Oklahoma and other states to bring this curriculum and this process to all of the prisons. And then we are big fans of Andre Norman. Andre Norman spent 14 years in maximum security prison, then had an epiphany while in solitary confinement that he was going to get out and go to Harvard. And he did. And so that was a little over 25 years ago. And now he's what I believe is the world's leader in prison reform. And I happened to go to a prison in Tennessee with him and his group. And we went to the hardest of the hardcore prisons. And we were in the hardest of the hardcore blocks, shaking hands and hugging these inmates who simply wanted to heal their trauma. At least the ones we talked with, they wanted to heal their trauma and have a productive, happy life. And they all, every single one of them that I spoke with, wanted to be part of the gardening program at prisons. So there are many layers to this, but yeah. And back to how I see the world. So to the degree that we transition away from unsustainable use of our land and our resources, using poisons, to the degree that we transition away from that towards stewardship, is to the degree that we survive and thrive or not as a species. And I want to show you a couple more things since we got a couple more minutes. There's avocados and Jamaican cherries. We got bananas in the ground. This is our banana. We have bananas just hanging here. And then here, this is our propagation station that Hota and Carlos and Chris are putting together. And over here, we're turning all of this into more perennial food forests. And we're starting with annuals with some perennial trees mixed in. Perennials take longer. So here you can see the seeds coming in. Here's our soil area. And so perennials like fruit trees and berry bushes, they take a little longer to be productive than annuals. So what we're doing is we're starting with annuals and then we're transitioning as the perennial trees get bigger, then we'll shade out the annuals and then we'll have mostly perennials, which is a better use of resources because you don't have to maintain them much at all. And they produce more yield per square vertical meter than an annual. And here's why. So an annual will produce a yield at one level. A perennial food forest has 7 levels, right? So underground, you might have a fruit tree, and underneath that, you might have some turmeric or ginger or sweet potatoes, some berry bushes, some vines going up the fruit tree that produce grapes and passion fruit and so on. So now you've got 7 layers of food in the same place as typically you'd have 1 layer of food.
That's amazing. Jim, I want to go back real quick because we're going to wrap this up in just a minute. But before we do, where are you 5 years from now? What is your vision? We're going to co-manifest this with you together. Yes. I want to hear the vision, brother. I want to hear where you're going with this whole thing and what your dream is. And your dream is our dream. So let's talk about that.
All right. So if you can conceive it and believe it, you can achieve it. So peace on earth in general terms is what I can conceive and believe. And I can share the strategy and how to get there. There is one thing that supplants scarcity, and that is abundance. And there's one thing that ends war, and that is peace. When we start with the idea whose time has come stronger than all of the armies of the world, the idea of creating radical abundance everywhere, then that will supplant scarcity, which also then heals trauma, which then leads to peace. So I see in the next really 4 to 7 years, a transition towards putting these systems everywhere. And when we win this war, the Garden of Eden is our prize.
It's already won, brother. It's already won. Thank you to work that you're doing right there. And, Jim, for people like you, I want to give you some accolades because it takes determination, it takes courage, it takes fortitude. It takes a lot to say, this is my dream and I'm going to live it, because you're not conforming to being in the box, right? You're basically blowing that box open and you're creating your own reality. And the one that we really need to be in, because that matrix mentality where everybody needs to be in the box, that can be a hard one to break out of. And so when you're one of those pioneers that's saying, no, that's not how it's going to be, and I'm going to do it the way it should be done, and I don't care if it conforms with what I'm being told or not. I know enough in my heart and soul that I need to break away from that and go the path untraveled. And it's pioneers like yourself that are doing that make this world a better place. And I will tell you, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to spend this hour with you. Super excited. And I can't wait. We're going to come down and visit you. We're going to stay.
Yes.
And we're going to, do some filming, maybe get to learn more and do another video just with you down there. And once again, all that will be on the podcast. And David, you're doing the Win Network. Unfortunately today I don't have a lot of extra time, but David, if you got 2 minutes and you want to just finish off, let's do it. And a great podcast. Great. And Jim, thank you, sir, for your time. It's greatly appreciated.
Great.
Thank
Let
you.
me just chime in. I don't want to throw too much, in the fan right now. It's all delicious, by the way. So, but for Jim, a couple of things important. First of all, Tamana is on with us. She hasn't had a chance to say hello to you, but she's very and kind of instrumental in some of the things to help us to manifest. And she can't really talk, but I'm going to send her your information because she's involved with a gentleman, James Boyd Fuller from Louisiana. And why is that important? They have what's called Planet Health. I think it's called Planet Health. But it's a very interesting project because it's about soil remediation. And they have determined that the ashes, the byproduct of coal mining, is actually very good for organic growth. So that's what Tamana, she's in India. So that's one like gift today with getting to know Tamana is additional to Sean. But then also, I don't know, have you heard that Kennedy is in office? So there's another contact that we just had a couple of shows ago that was on with the Victory Gardens Alliance. Have you heard of Victory Gardens?
I've been officially invited on to the Kennedy team by Sayer G. So it's all moving together. Yes.
Okay. Well,
Can I just ask?
Yeah, go ahead, Tamana. Why don't you say just a minute? I know we're running out,
Yeah,
but go ahead.
just a minute, just a second. I guess maybe 50 seconds. Firstly, Jim, I wanted to, because belonging to India, I mean, I have seen that, we have a lot of women involvement in environment. Many of our major eco-feminists, they're like looked at the connection between women and nature. So does that happen in the western part of the world as well, or is it something else? A. B. You spoke about jails, etc. India is a land of spiritual gurus. So, in most of these jails, all these gurus, even the ones who've been tainted within the jails, they give spiritual strictures, and it really helps the prisoners. People who are like first time or second time of violators of law. So, it helps. So, I mean, if your views
Yes.
on it.
I love it. I'm with you 100% on that. That's the foundation of everything. It is exactly what you're talking about. So, and Vandana Shiva is one of my heroes.
Yes. Yeah. She stays near my place, actually.
Yeah, we had Professor Goswami on here not too long ago, and Professor Goswami has a project in India where they're taking unused land and trying to cultivate that with a lot of farming and producing, very much like what you're doing, Jim, in a way where they can start making the villages sustainable by taking all this unused land and using it to grow crops. And Tamana, I'm not sure what part of India you're in, but and I
New Delhi.
apologize because I saw you pop on, and maybe in a future episode tomorrow or next week we can get you on where you can get a full hour with you, and maybe Jim, if you're free at the same time, you could jump on and be a guest with us again, and we could continue this on because it's such great information. And I love the fact we got people in India communicating with people in the U.S. and we're on one single mission, and that's David's dream, and that's what David's putting together. And David, it's all manifesting, brother. All your hard work, all your calls, all your emails, all your stuff. Here we are on this call together. Win, 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 baby. The Win Network. It's Win, and we're doing it, man. And a lot of love to everybody out there watching us. We appreciate you sharing, subscribing, putting this information out, sharing it to your friends and family. And once again, I really apologize because sometimes these calls can go, we say it's an hour, they can go an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours because it's just so good. But unfortunately today, I really do have a commitment that I got to get to. But Jim, we'll circle back, and Tamana, we'll get back in touch, and let's pick this up and find a day we can all get back together and do this some more.
Big hug, you guys. Love you. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, man. Take care. Great weekend, everybody. Love you all. Have a great one. We'll talk again soon.
Ciao.